one of the leading experts on this subject. David Asher is here. He's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a former State Department COVID investigator. David, great to have you back with us, sir.
Always good. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
What do you make? I just basically let you take the lead on what you think the big headline is here today.
Expanding and continuing top-down cover-up from Dr. Fauci and his senior advisor of 26 years, David Morens, who testified this afternoon basically that he deliberately avoided government emails to avoid FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, and basically provided a covert channel directly to Fauci via Morens, who basically his office was like, I believe, just like literally right outside of Fauci's office. He worked directly for him. He was a senior advisor. I've been senior advisor to several secretaries of state. It's that there aren't too many. There aren't too many of us in those jobs, and so this guy directly was conspiring with Peter Daszak of Equal Health Alliance on how to maintain their grant. In fact, how to expand it, including and as well as cover up the work they were doing to fund research at the Hudson Institute of Virology and other Chinese labs that contributed to the creation of COVID-19 based on our own State Department investigation that involved, we were looking at all intelligence related to China.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking at NIH's communications. Now I can see them, and it's like, it's hard to know which side of the cover-up's worse, China or U.S. I'd still say it's China, but it's closing in.
There's some of these emails that have been released to the public include this guy, Dr. I'm sorry, what's his name again? David Morens. Morens asking Peter Daszak. He says, I ask you that nothing gets sent to me except to my Gmail, he writes. Additionally, he says, there's no worry about FOIAs. I can either send stuff to Tony on his private Gmail or hand it to him at work or at his house. He is too smart to let colleagues send him stuff that could cause trouble. Additionally, an email from June 16th of 2020, we are all smart enough to know to never have smoking guns. And if we did, we wouldn't put them in emails. And if we found them, we'd delete them. So there are a lot of, talk about smoking gun emails. Here he is
and
talking
Daszak
about
responded to him. I didn't realize there were so many FOIAs and a bunch targeting our grant. I'll pass it on to the reporters. This is a conspiracy to cover up is a federal crime. I hope people know that. It's not when two or more officials conspire to cover up information that's germane to the public health, it's a gross violation of their oath of office. But it's also a federal crime. And this conspiracy is so vast and so expansive that I'm concerned that even if Daszak gets disbarred, even if EcoHealth is disbarred technically, they're still going to get DOD money. You realize that Senator Schumer apparently at the last second took out of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, language that banned DOD from funding EcoHealth Alliance. So that passed the House massively, but within the Senate, it got taken out at the last second. So DOD is still apparently funding the EcoHealth Alliance. So
how about that? My impression,
our government is still totally out of control. And what this hearing reveals is that the deep state stuff.
Yeah,
I thought it was bad. It's 10 times worse. Now you understand why the Trump team is talking about schedule effing people. This guy Morens, his chief advisor to Fauci for 26 years, been in the U.S. government for 48 years. He's got to be in his 70s. His conspiring with Daszak on how to maintain their grant at a time when there was, more than sufficient evidence for that grant to be withheld, is a violation of federal law, and it extends to his boss Tony Fauci. You can't. When I worked for the Secretary of State as a senior advisor, if I did something wrong, even Secretary Powell would be held responsible. We have authority to act on their behalf in many cases. So this is a totally outrageous situation. But what's new? What's interesting now is the Democrats are now just as outraged, it looks like, as the Republicans. It's taken a long time, and I'm very glad, because this is all obviously a bipartisan issue. This is, what Fauci's motivation was, he was just, obviously he wanted to avoid being blamed for creating the greatest human health disaster in history. But, unfortunately, his hands are in the kitty, and his senior advisor, continued to conspire as the investigation on the Hill unfolded, basically to obstruct it. So, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to cover up. How many, is there a RICO here? I think there is probably.
So this guy, David Morens, is a medical doctor working in the government, working as the top aide to Anthony Fauci, and as you put it, involved in a conspiracy to delete all sorts of information and cover up the role that that they played in the start of COVID-19.
And preserve a contract, and preserve EcoHealth's contract, even as the Congress was moving to eliminate it, and as was even HHS itself. Finally. Yes. The question is, where's the Inspector General in Health and Human Services? It's like they don't exist. It's a farce. I'll introduce you to someone who used to be one of the top IG people there, and she's essentially a whistleblower now, and she'll tell you how the place needs to be totally turned upside down. Nobody's held accountable. This guy Morens basically talked about the FOIA lady who handles Freedom of Information Act requests, tutoring him on how to avoid getting FOIA'd by the Congress.
This is James. Let me play some audio for you here. This is James Comer last week detailing the emails that you're referencing. Take a listen.
Shifting to some questions regarding NIH's document retention policies. Dr. David Morens, a senior advisor to Dr. Fauci for decades, wrote in an email to Dr. Daszak, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I am FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we are all safe. Plus, I deleted most of those earlier emails after sending them to Gmail," end quote. Is that consistent with NIH document retention policies?
It is not.
Yeah, and it goes on. A lot of those emails where he's talking about erasing all of this. And then he testifies today, David Morens is testifying right now before Congress, and he's now saying he didn't realize emails were considered federal records. Listen to this.
And I must say, based on my understanding of what a federal record was, I truly don't think I have ever seen a federal record in 26 years of being at NIH. And if I'm wrong about that, I apologize, because it just never dawned on me.
It never dawned on him that an email is a federal record, David Asher.
I've been in the federal government, like 7 times in and out over the years. It's been sort of my passion to serve and do these investigations like the one I did on COVID. This is stuff that rises to the level of, again, organized criminal conspiracy. This guy, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets indicted. I certainly think he should be. His pension should be, halted and his benefits withdrawn. There's all sorts of penalties, administrative, but there really is a grounds for a criminal case here, and that's the thing that's sort of pathetic. In the midst of the biggest public health disaster in history, Dr. Fauci, who really without any direct authority, sort of just took charge, and somehow President Trump, and I do fault President Trump for letting him do this. Fauci did the New York thing, and the president just sort of bit into it and let this guy go on a mission, basically, that wasn't really to try to stop or disrupt COVID, or, his mission was to cover it up. And the role of the NIH in funding it, including his own personal role.
Well,
and so,
part of that is because the subject matter that
it's hard to believe.
Yeah, part of that is because the subject matter he's engaged with is highly technical and scientific. So it's esoteric enough that you're wondering, okay, who can handle this? Who can communicate to the public? Fauci's doing it at the outset, but little did we know at the very beginning of this that he was very much covering up his role in this disaster. And now I'm wondering, David Asher, to what extent are the walls going to ever close in on this guy? I see Peter Daszak, I see Fauci's lieutenant, but I don't see Fauci really.
He's supposed to be. He's supposed to testify here. It's coming up, I believe, next month, as I understand it. We'll see if he wiggles out of it. We'll see if he takes the Fifth Amendment. Wouldn't that be incredible? This whole thing. I don't know what these guys are unabashed in their. When their lips are moving, they're lying. We figured that out. So how do you trust our public health bureaucracy? The reality is, we had some great people in the Trump administration involved in the public health response to COVID. Dr. Robert Redfield. I mean, he was the one who should have been in charge. He ran the Center for Disease Control. This was a disease control challenge, obviously, but he was displaced by Fauci's politicization, which I see is basically not really designed to protect the public health as much as it was designed to protect Fauci. I mean, I think he literally stepped into a void without anyone really questioning his credibility or his sincerity. I mean, instead, he's seen as sort of this person, his personal hero, physician to the people. I mean, you look at his own behavior and his behavior as reflected through his chief of staff,
yes.
Okay, and his senior advisor. In both cases, they were engaged in back channel cover-ups and working to preserve contracts that were basically they should have been disqualified for lack of compliance with federal contracting rules. I mean, EcoHealth failed to respond to requests for reports. They never gave any information related to the questions that the Trump White House actually put to HHS demanding, access to Chinese scientists that they had funded. None of that stuff ever went forward. It's all covered up. We still don't know the answers, but I think we're going to learn them, and I think it's going to disgust people. I think people are going to be really disappointed. I don't blame President Trump. But I do blame the all of us to some extent. We should have been more on guard for something like this. When we saw COVID coming, we knew it was going to be a freight train that was going to be almost impossible to stop. But little did we know our own government would be involved in trying to obstruct the effort to disrupt it and actually hold the Chinese accountable. Because remember, I mean, the Chinese are the ones that killed, probably, if you look at excess mortality, about 27 million people are dead because of the Chinese cover-up. The fact that we got involved in their cover-up, shame on us. It just deepens the well of disappointment and distrust.
It's, the biggest scandal of our lifetimes. So you've got this situation where I remember Scott Atlas, when he worked in the Trump administration. He said he detected this with Anthony Fauci. He said, I would bring all this literature with me on the latest science, what we were learning, whether it was about masking or distancing. And I was dismissed. In fact, they chased him out of the room. They tried to prevent him from sharing that intelligence. And Fauci never came equipped with research. He just came equipped with his ego and opinions. Did you see this at all? I don't know how close you were ever to Anthony Fauci, but in your COVID investigation.
I did reach out to his chief of staff and his senior advisor, David Morens, another individual who was handling. Well, actually, it was Dr. Tabak, I believe. It was his deputy, and we were asked to send us the proof that COVID had a natural origin, and they sent us this proximal origins paper that now we know they were involved. Literally, Fauci himself was involved in editing, and Morens was essentially involved in helping coordinate the writing of it, with Peter Daszak of the EcoHealth Alliance and their Chinese counterparts. I mean, so again, rather than hunting for answers, when we at the State Department officially approached them and said, send us your investigative file that gives us the confidence that this thing came out of a natural origin. They sent us this manufactured paper that wasn't even a peer-reviewed it was analysis. It was just a letter essentially to a journal that was treated as if it was the gospel, from God incarnate. The reality is it was all part of a cover-up. I mean, the scientists who wrote the analysis on proximal origins were first on the take of NIH and Dr. Fauci directly. They all got big contracts after they wrote this thing. Some of them had big ones before that as well. But the point is, this whole thing was doctored. This whole process of where COVID came from the standpoint of our public health authorities, was a conspiracy to deceive not just the American public but our own government, i.e. the Department of State. I mean, we were trying to look at this from a national security lens because we felt that the Biological Weapons Convention had probably been violated. They certainly had a very aggressive gain of function research, as everyone knows going on there. It was being funded in part by the U.S., not exclusively. But the insight that our public health authorities had, they never shared with us at the State Department. None of that went to the National Security Council, who I briefed repeatedly on our origins investigation. All they tried to do was cover things up from us at the State Department and they were very concerned that we were going to open a can of worms, as they frequently referred to it, or a Pandora's box that was going to blow up in their face. And that's what they told us. I mean, literally in communications I had with the chief of staff and legislative director of the NIH itself, which goes above Fauci, Dr. Collins' office, I mean, they deceived us repeatedly in communications, knowingly. So, I mean, where was Dr. Collins in this process, too? I mean, it's not, so our top two public health leaders in the National Institutes of Health, Fauci and Collins, were both involved in a cover-up, in a top-down conspiracy to deceive the American public and the U.S. government itself regarding China's role in the gain-of-function research that got out of control and let this Frankenstein's monster loose. And they should have been, using their knowledge and their connections in China to try to detect this, disrupt it, and stop it well before it hit our shores. Instead, they were involved in funding, research that they never told us about to insert things like the infamous furin cleavage site into a coronavirus to endow it with the properties to be able to spread in a way that SARS never did. I mean,
it's all too crazy.
Again, it's crazy. It's crazy, and I thank you for letting me express my indignation. That's about all I can do in this town of Washington, D.C. right now.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're going to keep consulting you, and I hope to get more of your indignation on this subject, because it definitely deserves.
Well, we're going to keep reporting on it at Hudson Institute, and trust us, we're not going to give up on this.